speaker, still patiently waiting, is Bill Small. He is a coach and a consultant. The title of his presentation today is The Art of Mind, the 8 keys to less stress, more focus, improved relationships, and communication. Bill has been leading people to more success in their lives and businesses for 20 years. Along with more than 35 years in the music and entertainment business, he has used his talents as a communicator and experience as a business owner and training as a coach to help individuals, business owners, and teams achieve new levels of success and satisfaction. Sharing a home in Wimberley, Texas with his partner Julie, his son Jude, hey Jude, and dog Midas, he gratefully spends his time creating and performing music, building businesses, and working with clients. It sounds like the perfect life. Let's give a warm launchpad welcome to Bill Small.
Well, that made me sound important. Kind of odd. Anyway, hi. Yes, I'm sitting here in Wimberley. And anybody who feels like keeping their camera on, please do so. I love having faces to look at instead of just, black squares with names in them. I have to say, I have done a lot of Zoom teaching and Zoom connecting with people, but I have never done this where I'm just kind of presenting something to a bunch of people that I don't know on Zoom. So this should be fun. Occasionally you will find that I might ask you maybe a question where I'd say show of hands. So if I can see you, show me your hand. If I can't, maybe throw a thumbs up or a hand in the chat. I'm going to have the chat box open. I can see it the whole time. If you have a question or anything, don't hesitate to throw it in there. I want to make sure, Kate, did you see that someone put a chat up that they might have an idea for you? You should look at it. Okay,
yeah,
good.
I
didn't know if you were looking.
My name. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And Julia, I feel a little bit like you in that I have done an awful lot of different things in my life and my time up to this point. And sometimes I've considered it a curse. Other times, I have to say, I find that it serves me more and more. Because all those experiences, I bring them to every new thing that I do. And it makes me better at it. And that popped into my head when you said that. I was like, oh, that sounds like me. Because I started my professional journey in life in the entertainment business, theater, and then into music. I moved to Austin, Texas the first time in 1990 from New York to play music, and spent about 10 years in Austin the first time, and then traveled around a bit, again, lived in Nashville for a little bit, came back. And I still actively am in the music business. COVID changed that a whole lot. I lost a good percentage of my income and some of the things that I was doing, not being able to go perform live music. So for all of you people who lost work due to COVID, I get it. Luckily, some of the other work that I'm doing is still going, which is coaching people primarily. I've been doing that as you heard for quite a while. Somewhere along my road, I got interested in personal development, and then I got trained as a coach, but I didn't know that was a thing you could do as a job. I'm a coach that meant swimming coach, or baseball coach to me. I didn't get that was something you could do until about 12 years ago. And I actually took a job as a coach with a company that was providing coaches for some prominent authors who had coaching programs, and never really looked back. It's something that I love and that I found that I have an aptitude for. So I'm saying all that because I hope that today, after you hear me blah, blah, blah about all kinds of things, that you can walk away with something that's useful. And again, if you have any questions as we go, don't hesitate to throw them in the chat. So, what are we going to talk about? Why am I here? Well, I think we've all noticed, and it's come up several times already today. The world's a little weird right now. It's a little strange. I'm talking to you from my house, which is odd. Shannon asked me to do this about a year ago, and we missed connections. Now I kind of wish I had, because at least I would have been in a warm room full of people. But this is good too. But you may notice that beyond your own circumstances, there's almost a free-floating anxiety flitting about. I mean, I personally have had days over the last 6, 7, 8 months where, for absolutely no seeming reason at all, I just have a really bad day. Like, I don't want to do anything. My stress level's up for no apparent reason. Anybody else are experiencing a little bit of that from time to time? And I really I've gotten to the point where I'm chalking that up to there is a lot of uncertainty and anxiety floating about in the world, not to mention whatever you're personally dealing with. And we all have our ways that we deal with that, or that we don't. Some of the ways that can show up is a lack of focus, like just really not being able to get stuff done. There's been this other running conversation between myself and some of my clients about, you would think, logically, you would think that we all have this, or some of us anyway. I have more time on my hands than I used to. I'm not traveling the way that I was. So you would think I could get a lot of stuff done. All these other projects, all these other things in my business that I want to take the next steps on. You think, man, I have all this time. I should be able to do that. And honestly, it occurs for me that I don't have any extra time at all, that it's no different than it ever was. And it really just comes down to my ability to focus, which, given the circumstances and everything that's going on, is sometimes difficult. I am seeing the occasional head nod of, yeah, I get that too. And then the other thing that I think really gets affected is our ability to communicate. And I mean that in a lot of different ways. So first of all, this is a very odd method of communication. I'm not used to it in this way. We're having to communicate this way in so many different situations now. And it's different. It really is. It's very, very different. It's not bad, and you can certainly do it well. Not to mention that when there's extra anxiety or stress or uncertainty, all of our relationships, whether they are personal, professional, etc., can be affected. Is that making sense to anybody? Awesome. So, what do we do about that? What actually gets in the way of taking ground in those areas? What gets in the way of our success? Well, the one thing that I have said to every potential client I've ever had is the only thing that ever gets in the way of me and something I want or my success is me. But it's very, very difficult for me to see how I get in my way. That's why I have a job as a coach, because I'm good at seeing how other people get in their way. However, there are things that we can do. And the thing that really gets in our way is that beautiful, terrible thing between your ears, your brain. And while your brain is amazing and powerful and just crazy, crazy piece of work and it's really good at certain things, it is one dangerous person to live with. The mind is a terrible thing in a lot of ways. I actually was going to write a book. Maybe I still will someday. Somebody said, if you were to write a book, what would the title be? And I'm going to ask you to excuse my French for a second, but the title would be, Your Brain is an Asshole. Because most of the time, it is. And I mean that in an odd way. So obviously, the human brain is great at solving problems. The human brain is great at keeping you alive. I mean, you're all breathing right now and you're not thinking about that. It's just happening, right? Your heart's pumping, your organs are moving. It's all good. You don't have to do anything about that. Your brain's taking care of it. However, left to its own device, your brain will say things to you that you would never let another human being say to you. It would not be okay. Your brain doesn't necessarily differentiate what works for you and what's good for you and what doesn't work for you and what's bad for you. You know, have you ever noticed, obviously it's not as big a deal in the world as it once was, but I used to talk to people a lot about, quitting things like smoking. It doesn't take that long in the grand scheme of things for nicotine to get out of your system. But your brain doesn't really want to stop doing that. Your brain doesn't differentiate whether it's good for you or bad for you or anything else. It just likes repeated patterns. It likes it when you do things over and over again, whether those things are good for you or not. So what do you do about all that? And why is that? It's perfectly natural. It's the way that we are wired. Human beings have automatic behaviors and habits that we've built over years and years and years. There's no kids on this thing today. So we've all been around a little while. And our brains have developed all matter of habits and patterns, habits of thinking, patterns of automatic behavior that mostly we're not even aware of. So what can we do about it? Well, you can't fix or change what you can't see. So it brings up sort of the heart of what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. And it's a word that's become a little bit of a buzzword, mindfulness. Mindfulness is sort of all the rage these days. Anybody, show of hands, have any experience with mindfulness or mindfulness meditation or any of the apps that are, okay, I got one, I got a little bit, I got a little bit. Okay, good, a little bit. Great. So it's kind of a big thing these days. There's apps out there, the Calm and the Calm app, and there's, some other ones, meditation apps, some of which are really good. I pretty much have all of them. But why are they there? Why is it important? What does it even mean? I know mindfulness has even really crept into corporate training. It's a thing. But I'm not sure people actually know what it is. The definition of mindfulness is, I'm going to have to read it. The awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally to the unfolding experience moment by moment. That's a big definition. How I like to think of it is just pulling out the word awareness, aware, being aware of what's happening right now, in this moment. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But if you think about just that word mindfulness, there's another word that we may be more familiar with in some ways, mindlessness, mindless. And what are some examples of mindlessness? Well, again, the human brain being the amazing thing it is. Previous to coronavirus, I spent most of my weekends driving around Texas, performing live music. Now, if you've ever driven around Texas, you know, to get to the next town over takes a while. So I might spend, 4 or 5 hours a day in the car every weekend. And I'm very familiar with this experience of driving, where you're driving and you're driving perfectly well, going the speed limit, staying in the lane, everything's cool. But all of a sudden, it's like you wake up and the last 20 minutes or half an hour, you have no idea what just happened. You don't remember anything you passed. It's like you've been gone. You know what I'm talking about? Anybody ever have that? Where you're driving and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, where was I? Yeah. And then on the one hand, it's kind of scary. Whoa, is everything okay? Luckily, the human brain is amazing enough that it can manage both tasks. I still don't recommend, zoning out while you're driving, but it happens, right? So what happened during that period of time? What happened to me while I was driving down the road and then I didn't notice what was going on? It's a really simple thing. I started thinking. I had a thought. And it's like if that thought were a train, I jumped on the train and I rode it away. And I just rode it down the road. And while I was doing all that thinking about whatever I was thinking about, I was literally gone. Whatever was happening in the moment, I was not aware of that. Now, I have no doubt that I would have, snapped to if I needed to see something. If another car had tried to cut me off or something, I'm sure I would have noticed. But at the same time, I was gone, like really. Now, that's a rather extreme example, but just think about this morning, the time from when you woke up to now, and how many times you may have had a similar experience where you were lost in thought, where you just went away, where, like my wife did the other day, where she set the coffee pot but didn't put a filter in it because she just wasn't thinking. You know what I mean? She wasn't paying attention to what she was doing. She was thinking over here. It's about something else, right? And then there's coffee all over the place. We do that kind of stuff all the time. Well, that's your brain having thoughts, and you jumping on the thought train. And you'd be amazed at all the different ways that actually gets in our way. So in my title of my little discussion today, I did talk about 8 keys. And I said that because there's 8 areas that I tend to focus on with people when it comes to training in and cultivating mindfulness. And I'm going to tell you what those 8 areas are. We're obviously not going to talk about all of them. I'm going to touch on what I think might be some useful pieces. And I'm also going to make sure that you guys walk away with at least one good tool that you can use. So the 8 areas, those 8 keys, those 8 areas that I usually work with people in are attention, automaticity, so meaning those automatic behaviors I mentioned, judgment, acceptance, goals, or let's say the pursuit of goals, compassion, the ego, and integration. How do we actually take, all of these different aspects and really make them a part of our lives? So again, we can't talk about all of it, but it seems germane to me to talk about what are we paying attention to. So I've had this conversation a couple of thousand times, I think, with clients. It's one of the first things that I try to discover about any coaching client I have is, what are they paying attention to? Because whatever you're paying attention to, you are giving energy to. Does that make sense? Whatever you're paying attention to, you're giving energy to. But mostly we're not aware of what we are paying attention to. When you're giving energy to something, it is actually, that energy is helping create your results. You know, think about it. It's one of the weird things about this Zoom business is because I can't feel any of you. You can't feel me necessarily right now, the way you would if we were in a room, right? You get what I mean? You can feel other people. Yes? When you're in a physical proximity with you can feel them, whether you want to or not. Sometimes that's a great experience. Somebody walks in the room and they're real charismatic and, you know, it just feels good. And then there's the opposite experience where somebody walks in a room, it's like they have a little dark cloud over their head, you know, and you're almost bummed out right after they walked in the room because they're just a bummer. It's not like they're doing it on purpose. That's just the energy that they're in that time. I might be getting a little woo-woo, but this is actually how the universe works. So whatever energy you're giving to something is doing an enormous amount in the background to create your results. And whatever you're paying attention to, you're giving energy to. So follow me along with that for a minute. So for example, I decided in 1997 that I would become self-employed. You know, I had lots of different jobs. Man, did I have lots of different jobs. From running a warehouse to cleaning pools to, you know, you name it. And then, of course, I was always playing music. And I wanted to be done with all the jobs that had nothing to do with playing music. So I decided, okay, that's it. I'm playing music, I'm gonna be self-employed. Here's what we do. Well, fast forward about 10 years. And 10 years later, what I noticed was an extreme pattern of feast or famine. I would have work for a little while and things would be good. And then I would have absolutely no work and things would get really sketchy really fast. And when I had work, I never had so much work that I made so much money that it would carry me through, you know, to the next time I started having work. That might sound familiar to some of you, I'm not sure. In any case, you can imagine that 10 years of that pattern is a little tiring. So I was already doing this kind of work with other people, and I decided, well, maybe I should have these conversations with myself. So the first thing I asked myself was, Bill, what are you paying attention to? What are you paying attention to? And it's as if I never noticed. But I realized that what I was paying attention to was one thing and one thing only, money. And you might ask, well, how do you know you were paying attention to money? Well, it's because it's the only thing I was thinking about, ever. Like really. It was disturbing, actually, to realize how much that's the only thing I was thinking about. And it didn't matter whether I had it, you know, whether the bank account was flush, or whether I didn't have it. It's what I was thinking about. When I didn't have it, I was obviously trying to think of ways where I could get more. And when I did have it, I was thinking about how long it was going to last and all the things that I had to pay with it, right? I mean, it kind of makes sense in some ways. We do have to do a certain amount of that just to run our lives and be financially responsible. But when I really took a look at it, I thought, wow, left to my own devices, when I let my brain do whatever it wants to do, it starts thinking about money. And to be more precise, it starts thinking about the lack of it. And here's the rub. So what I was paying attention to is the lack of money, of something I didn't have. And it doesn't matter that I'm talking about money. I could be talking about anything. I could be talking about anything that we want, that we desire in life. And what I was thinking about was the lack of it, was not having it. And what was showing up for me? A constant, repeated pattern of not having it. Not to mention, it didn't feel very good. I mean, you can imagine that if all I'm doing is thinking about the lack of money, even when I wasn't aware of it, there's an underlying current of anxiety happening. You know, that doesn't feel good. That's not a good feeling to have. So what did I do about that? Well, the first thing was to actually realize that it was happening. And the only way I could realize that it was happening was to listen to that voice in my head. You know, the one that's saying, oh, I don't have one of those, or oh, you have one of those too, or what are you talking about, that voice? Because that voice, your brain, that's not you. That's just your brain. You are not your brain. You are not the voice in your head. If you were, how would you listen to it? But man, we believe what that thing says, don't we? We love to believe everything that that voice in our head tells us. And most of it is complete and utter crap. I mean, really, most of what your brain tells you is complete and utter crap. It's not true. And you don't need to hang your hat on it. Let that sink in for a minute. You may not believe me. Your brain's probably arguing with me right now, going, what are you talking about? I'm super smart. My brain tells me things that are great. No, mostly it doesn't, especially about you. Because when I really got underneath what my brain was telling me about the lack of money, it had more to do with me being a screw up. You get that? That's what my brain was really telling me. You're messing up. You better fix this. So it's an interesting question to ask yourself. What are you paying attention to? And how you do that is two ways. One, you could think about what your brain tells you every day and what it feels like. So I know a lot of you are in between jobs. And that can be an uncomfortable place to be. So what are you going to pay attention to? Are you going to pay attention to what you don't want? And mostly your brain is trying to fix what you don't want, right? What you don't want, of course, is to be unemployed. Who wants to be unemployed? And your brain's going to try to find all these different ways to fix it. And oftentimes that's going to have you being and paying attention to what you don't want, which is being unemployed. And it puts you in, I know this sounds a little paradoxical, it's weird, but what if you could actually just spend time being right here, right now, in this moment? Because I'm looking at anybody I can see, and you all look okay to me. And I don't know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now, neither do you. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But y'all look okay. So in this moment, everything's okay. In this moment. But your brain is never thinking about this moment. It's always thinking about either what might happen next or what already happened. You ever notice that? Who's a future thinker? Who always thinks about the future? Anybody? I do. If my brain left to its own devices is always thinking about the future. Always. Any past thinkers left to your own devices? Brain always thinks about the past. All right, DB, Sherry, Tally. Yep. In a way, it's the same thing. So let's talk about the past and and the future for a second. So the future obviously has not happened, correct? We can agree, I should think. Hasn't happened yet. Don't know what's going to happen. Here's the deal. The past, where does that exist? Is it in your head? If I was able to look in your head, would I see it? If I did an MRI on you, would we find your past? No. The past does not exist. It doesn't exist. The only thing that's left from your past is stories about things that happened. And like it or not, your stories are not true. They're just your stories. Have you ever noticed that you change your stories about past events sometimes? Something maybe that happened to you when you were a kid and it seemed awful. You have a different story about it now. Have you ever been to an event, a movie, a family gathering, and you walk out with somebody and you're like, man, that was great. And they're like, nah, that was terrible. Which one's true? Which story is true? Neither? Both? I don't know. Like I said, I spent almost 15 years in a band here in Central Texas called Walt Wilkins and the Mysticeros. And the guy who's sort of the primary lead singer of the band, Walt Wilkins, is a great songwriter. I met him in Nashville a long time ago. Loved playing music with him. And many years ago, we were playing in Tyler, Texas. And anybody been to Tyler, Texas? All right. I'm not going to say anything else about Tyler, Texas. It wasn't the greatest gig in the world, but it was okay. Had a decent little crowd. We played our show. Hey, listen, I was getting paid to play music. How bad could that be, right? Even on the worst night, that's not so bad. So I had a pretty good time. I thought we did all right. And I walked off stage feeling pretty good about myself. I was like, yeah, that was we did all right. We did our job. And Walt walked right behind me going, that was terrible. That was the worst gig ever. And I had this moment where I'm thinking, where was he? Where was I? I was standing right next to him for the last 2 hours. So today, if I asked him about that show, and he still had that memory of it, whose memory is true? Whose story about that past is accurate, his or mine? If I asked 10 people from that audience, what would they say? All of that to say the past does not exist. The only thing that's left is your story about it, and your story is not true. It's just a story, and it changes. And it's part of the story that we tell ourselves about. We tell ourselves stories about everything. About everything. There's always a story running in your head about something. And whether you're thinking about the future all the time or the past all the time, the key here is that either one takes you out of the present. And the present moment is the only moment that's actually occurring. This moment, right here, right now, and now, and now, is the only time your life's actually happening. And when you allow your brain, which it's going to do, to pull you out of this moment into some future that hasn't happened yet, or some story about the past, you're actually missing your life. Your life's happening without you. Just like me driving in the car. I'm driving in the car, but I'm gone. I might have driven past the most beautiful thing in the world, but I never would have seen it. You, in your life, might zoom past the opportunity that you've been looking for. But when you're pulled away into the someday, one day future, or the already might have happened story about the past, you probably won't see it. Am I making sense? So let's try something real quick. If you're sitting, put your feet flat on the floor. See if you can kind of sit up relatively straight. Put your hands in a comfortable position in your lap. And just once you're there, just take one nice deep breath, just all the way in, all the way out. And now just for a minute, if you're comfortable with it, close your eyes. If you're not, you don't have to. And just take another breath in and feel it come all the way in, and then feel it leave your body. And just take a quick minute and notice that your feet are on the floor. You might wiggle your toes for a second, feel them in your shoes or on the floor. Notice your butt in the chair. Let your attention wander up your back to your shoulders. If your shoulders are tense and wrapped up around your ears, you can let them go. Just notice that you're breathing again. Take one more deep breath, all the way in through your nose, and this time all the way out through your mouth. And then gently open your eyes and come back. Hi, nice to see you. Welcome to the present moment. That's all it takes, and you can even do it faster than that. So why am I telling you that? Well, when you notice that your brain is taking you on a ride, you can come back as quickly as noticing that you are breathing. Sometimes that's all it takes. And then you're back, you're here, right now. Where does stress and anxiety come from? Stress and anxiety comes from fear of stuff that might happen. It's that simple. It comes from fear of stuff that might happen. Not stuff that's actually happening usually. Fear of stuff that might happen. Because here's the deal, right now, all of you that I can see, you're safe, you're sound, you all look okay. Everybody looks like they probably have food in the fridge and a roof over their heads. Yeah. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I know right this second, you're okay. And that's all there is. But we start to get really stressed out and anxious because our brains like to take us on a ride from all the places that, something might happen. Right? And it's really easy these days. Pandemic land, it's pretty weird. Pandemic and politics and division and stuff, and when's it going to end? And I'm sick of it too. I am. But in this moment, right here with you, it's okay. It's okay. So that's one thing that you can always remember. When you are feeling a little extra stress, a little extra anxiety, take a breath. Come back here to this moment and look around. As every one of you, no matter what your employment situation may be, has an amazing life. You can all, right in this moment, find an enormous amount of things to be grateful for. First of all, we're on Zoom, for God's sakes. I mean, how many parts of the world is this not possible? I had a mentor and someone I used to coach for. He's written a lot of books. His name is Joe Vitale. And he was in the 70s, he's written about this. He was homeless, living in Dallas on the street. But one of the things he used to do is go to the library, and he started reading a lot of what would now be called self-help books, personal development type things. And one of those books brought up this idea of being able to access gratitude for where you are right now, no matter what. This is a guy who's living on the street. And he decided it might be a good idea for him to try this, because what he'd been trying wasn't working, right? If you're not getting the results that you want, it's time to do something different, right? You keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're probably not going to get different results. So he thought, all right, I'm going to try this. What can I be grateful for? And he managed to get grateful for the fact that he owned a pencil. Because with that pencil, he could write a book. With that pencil, he could write a thank you card. With that pencil, there were all kinds of things he could do. And it actually began to change his perception of life. And now he's written, I don't even know how many books. So when you come back to the present moment, what you find is gratitude. I believe, and you may not agree with me, and that's okay. I believe that gratitude, that the experience of it, like the really feeling it, may be the most powerful, creative energy that a human being can possess. So whenever you can get back here, if you're even having a glimmer of it right now, whenever you can come back here, that's where you want to be. What takes us away from that? It's a little guy we call the inner critic. You have an inner critic, don't you? I do. He tells me all kinds of stuff. Your inner critic is that voice in your head that never has anything good to say. Could be anything. I mean, I can only imagine, because I've been there. When you are looking for a job, your inner critic, oh man, what a playground, for that guy. Oh, well, you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. They're not gonna pick you. You'll mess that up. They're gonna look at you and think, why don't you have a job? How'd you mess that? I mean, just all of that, right? You know what I'm talking about. It's probably been doing that already this morning. And what happens when we listen to that? I mean, the things that your inner critic says to you, would you let somebody talk to you like that? I mean, really, would you let another human being speak to you the way you let you speak to you? And I'm not picking on you. Everybody has this. From the Dalai Lama and Tony Robbins to, to the crotchety neighbor you have next door. Everybody has the inner critic. Everybody. It's how we're wired. My point is that you don't have to listen to it. Now, you're not going to shut it up. You can't make it stop. Just like you can't stop thinking, you can't stop any of that stuff from coming up. It's merely to be able to see it or hear it or be aware of it for what it is. It's just thoughts. Thoughts happen. We have a lot of them. Most of them are not useful. When you can begin to be aware of the critical voice in your head, and that it's actually just thoughts and has no basis in fact or reality, you get just a tiny bit of space from it. Instead of having to jump right on the train and start feeling bad about it, You get a tiny bit of space. When you can just see it for what it is, you get a tiny bit of space. And in that tiny bit of space, you can take a breath and be in this moment. And then all of a sudden, that voice, it's not quite as loud. And maybe you can find a little compassion for yourself. A little bit of compassion for yourself. You know, I think mostly when we hear the word compassion, we think it's something we're supposed to have for other people, right? Oh, that person's suffering or struggling. I should have compassion for them. And all the while, your inner critic is telling you that you're a shitheel because you don't have compassion, enough compassion for that person, or making you feel guilty about something. How about compassion for yourself? Primarily, compassion is just a desire to end suffering. When you have compassion for another person, it's really because you see that they're suffering and you know what it is to suffer, right? So you want it to end. Well, wouldn't you want that for you too? But it's interesting how much attention we do not pay to that. We do not give ourselves a break. We are in a culture, especially around work, that tells us that we have to do more all the time. Do more, do more, do more. You're not working hard enough. If you're not getting the result or getting the job or whatever, you do more. And you can't ever do enough. That's my thing. When my inner critic starts going and I get stuck, I always start feeling like, oh, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. But it's so backwards. We think, and we're taught this, that you have to do all the right things, right? Whatever it is. You have to take all the actions. And then you'll have the results you're looking for. You'll have the job, the relationship, the life, the family, the whatever it is you want. And then you can be the person you've always wanted to be. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to anybody? Like that's kind of, yeah. Yeah, it's wrong because it doesn't work like that. The order's just out of order. Being always comes first. Who you're being gives you what there is to do, which then gives you the result. Think about this. I'm thinking about it because I think Kathy said something about, when I first got on the call, she was talking to somebody and, oh, you were talking about Toastmasters and how they'll have you do a 1 or 2 minute, talk on something that you don't know about. And that's great practice for like a job interview, right? So think for a minute about a job interview situation or any situation where you have to communicate with someone in that type of way or in a way that might be uncomfortable or that there's something riding on it. And think about this thing of being and doing, okay? So there's something to do, right? There's things to say, there's something you want to communicate, right? You want to do well. Maybe if it's for a job, you obviously want the job. But think about this being piece. And let's circle back to what I was talking about how you can feel people, right? So you walk into the room for an interview and you have a little dark cloud over your head because you feel defeated because your inner critic keeps telling you you're not doing enough. And ultimately you're not good enough anyway. And these guys probably not going to hire you. And it's kind of pointless to go in there, but you already said you would, so you do. At that point, it really doesn't matter what you say. you're probably not going to get the gig. Now, if you can walk into that room in a way of being that's open and awake and present, it's also not going to matter what you say, because that person on the other side is going to get you immediately. When I was training to be a coach, I used to lead introductory seminars to this, personal development seminar program, right? And when I was training to do that, there was a guy that I'd sit in the back of the room, I'd watch him do it. And when they would train you to do this, they would give you a very, very definitive script that you had to memorize, and you had to memorize it so well that it sounded like it was coming out of your mouth for the first time, right? I mean, it's kind of like if you think about any kind of sales thing, if you give a salesperson a script, you want it to sound like they just are saying it for the first time, right? You don't want it to sound like it's a script. So I'm watching this guy. I want to see how he does it. This guy bumbled around the room, took his shoes off, said absolutely nothing that came from that script, and pretty much everybody in that room signed up and paid money to do this program. Because it had nothing to do with what he was saying and everything to do with who he was being. And the times where whatever I'm saying get in the way and who I'm being doesn't get me the result I'm looking for is when I'm stuck in my head. Again, I'm not present, right? I'm on the thought train. I'm lost in the future, lost in the past. I'm not present. So let's do one other quick thing, and then I'd love to take any questions, talk through anything you want to talk through. This will probably take about 3 minutes. I'll try not to make it take too much longer than that. I would like to do a quick and very specific kind of meditation with you. We've already done one. That one we did a few minutes ago, that was like a lightning fast body scan, where you actually sit and breathe and just be aware of your body. We're going to do something a little different because I brought up self-compassion. I'd like to do a very brief loving kindness meditation with you, if you would allow me. So once again, it'd be great if you could kind of sit up in a lot of times when people think of or talk about meditation, they think it's about relaxation. And to some extent, it is. You obviously don't want to be all tensed up, but it's not about falling asleep, though there are meditations for that if you want one. So it's good to be in sort of an attentive posture, but relaxed, attentive but loose. So if you can do that, that'd be great. And you could just, have your hands resting comfortably in your lap. And then if it works for you, close your eyes. If it doesn't, you might just kind of look maybe at the floor a few feet in front of you, or kind of have your eyes sort of half open, whatever works. And then just see if you can become aware of your breath. Notice that it's coming in and going out of your body. You might even focus on where you feel it the most, whether that's in your nose as it comes in your nose, or in the rise and fall of your belly or your chest. And wherever it is that you notice your breath physically coming in and going out, see if you can just put your attention there. And then just sit and know that you're sitting. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to do but this. Now, I'll warn you that if you're not used to meditating, you're going to have thoughts and you're going to go away. And when you notice that you're having thoughts and that you've gone away, perfectly fine. All you do is come back to your breath. Think of your breath as an anchor. It's the thing that's holding you into this moment. And your brain will pull you out. That's fine. It'll never stop doing that. All there is to do is come back. So just for a minute or two, we're just going to breathe. And now, if you found that you've gone away, come back to your breath. And then I want you to just kind of think about that inner critic voice that you have. I was going to say that you have sometimes, but really, we all have it pretty much all the time. You just think about that voice and how it makes you feel and the nasty things it says to you. And its opinion of you. And now I'm going to say 3 phrases. And I'd like you to repeat them in your mind, not out loud. And these phrases are directed at you. You're saying these things to yourself. Okay? May you be peaceful. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be healthy. May you be happy. Now, if it works better for you, you could say, may I be peaceful. May I be healthy. May I be happy. Either way. But as you sit and you breathe, just repeat those phrases in your mind. And if you get lost, just come back. So I said I don't want to keep you very long, so you can kind of release that mantra and continue to just breathe slowly, deeply. And when you're ready, and only when you're ready, you can gently open your eyes. Now, we didn't do that for very long, but hopefully you get the idea. I challenge you to do that every day, just for a week. Do it every day for a week. Take 3 minutes, 5 minutes, or if you need help, find a guided loving kindness meditation on the internet. There's a million of them. Practice a little self-compassion and see what opens up. Practice coming back to this moment and live the life you're actually living. Questions, comments, anything anybody wants to, needs help with, a challenge you're working on?
I'll throw out a question for you. Do you
Thanks.
have suggestions of that? I do this fast flip. I had an interview this morning, felt really confident with it. Halfway through the interview, I was not sure that I was the right guy for that position. By the
Right.
time I was done, I might be, I might not be, I don't know. And I know that all in my own head. It wasn't anything from the interview, but
Yeah. So, Terry, I think that's great. And you're right. It is just your head, right? So you remember at the beginning of this meditation, I said, think of your breath as an anchor. Okay. So one thing you could do is when you notice that that's starting to happen, because obviously you noticed it, right? Use your breath as an anchor. Stop being up here and just breathe. Just breathe and listen. You get what I'm saying? I think the other thing that happens sometimes it certainly happens in interviews, and I think it happens in a lot of our communication with people. And we don't do this because we're bad people, but our brains make it difficult for us to truly listen, right? Because you're sitting there, your brain's going, "Oh, I might not be the right guy for this," right? Well, you can no longer even hear what the interviewer's saying, right? So being able to come back to an anchor like breathing, and there's some other, little things like that you can do, just allows you to listen. Because what happens is instead of listening, we're always thinking about what we should say next, right? What should I say next to make this go well? What should I say next to get my point across, etc. The minute you do that, you're no longer listening. And I know I've had this situation where then whatever I say next is completely off. It's completely wrong, because I wasn't listening. I stopped listening. So use your breath as an anchor. And you could even do this before you walk in to an interview situation, is take a moment and just become very aware of your breathing, right? Be very purposeful about it. And just walk in with that, with the intention to just breathe and listen. You'll talk when you need to talk, and you'll say whatever there is to say, as long as you're breathing and listening. We only get messed up when we get too far ahead of ourselves or we just go away. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question? Awesome. Anybody else? Yeah.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Is these practices of mindfulness, does it become like a muscle? Does it get easier over time? Are you having to make the same effort every day it comes up to? Can it become
yes
a
and
habit
no.
to replace?
Yeah, I would say yes and no. Okay, so there's a yes, it does, because the practice of mindfulness, right, which might include different types of meditation. It might include this very purposeful, breathing as a practice, and there's some other things you could throw in there. Those become easier when they become habits, right? I pretty much meditate every day because I do at this point, right? I didn't always. And it was a lot harder for me to sort of get myself into the routine of doing it until it became a habit. So on that level, yes, it becomes easier. But I also have the experience where I have days where let's say I sit down to meditate, and some days my brain is just impossible. Like it's running away with me over and over and over again. And I might judge that and say, oh, well, I'm not good at this, or, or whatever, right? But it's just the nature of it. I do think that, like any kind of practice, you do gain facility with it. And more than anything else, your level of awareness grows. Now, there's no end game to that. You know what I mean? Like, it's a game that you keep playing. It's something you keep practicing. You never master it. It's only a practice. Even the masters don't consider themselves masters at it. They've just practiced more than you have. But I think the thing that happens is that you become aware more quickly of that inner critic, or of the thoughts, or of the getting in the future or the past. You become aware of it instead of it being automatic and you being shut off to it and having